So what's the best hybrid camera for content creation this year? Well, in this video, we're putting the new Nikon Z50ii to the test to see if it's the perfect hybrid camera for video and photo creators.
You gotta just press record.
So today we're testing the Z50ii in this film studio in a professional kind of shoot situation because it's gonna be one of the best ways to just see what this camera can actually do. And today we're working with our friend Abby, who's an artist in the Pacific Northwest. She's dope. You can check out some of her work here on the screen. We'll link her socials here on screen for you. So full disclosure, this video is sponsored by Nikon, and they also provided us with all of the cameras and lenses to make this video happen. But we did tell them we want complete freedom to put this camera through its paces however we see fit, and they agreed. So let's see what this thing can do. All right, so Abby's been working on a few creative projects here, and we're capturing a bunch of different content for her for photos and videos. But first, let's talk about the video aspects of the Z50, starting with its image quality. So the footage is honestly looking so good, and it's always a good idea if you're especially doing professional work, or even if you're just making YouTube videos, at the beginning of your sessions to pull your footage into your computer and just make sure everything's looking solid. So we're doing that here on set, making sure the footage looks great, and it really does. For the shoot, we're also using some of Nikon's most affordable lenses. So nothing here is really gonna break the bank, but the results are still gonna look really good. Okay, so part of getting good images with this camera is also understanding lighting, and we're being really intentional here with how we're using our light in this room. We're using this large window to act as our key light, which is gonna put a really nice, soft, pleasing look on Abby. And then we reinforce that window lighting with an additional key that we added to the window side. It's also really important to get a variety of compositions. And what we call this is coverage in video. So whenever we're shooting projects, whether it's professional or even just YouTube videos, we always try to get a variety of compositions so that we can mix up our edit to maintain interest throughout the video. So the way I typically work would be to produce a variety of wides, mids, and tights. So you'll see these variety of shots as we're working here with the Z50 Mark II. So when it comes to resolutions, this camera can shoot in 4K image quality, which is just gonna give you the best image quality out of this camera. Details are gonna look really good. You're gonna have a lot of pixels to work with as well. So we're shooting everything in 4K for this video. I chose to shoot specifically in 24 frames per second because our editing timeline is gonna be a 24 frames per second timeline. So I usually like to deliver and shoot in the same frame rate if at all possible. Now this camera can also shoot in 60 frames per second in 4K. But when you do that, you are gonna have an additional 1.5 times crop factor added to your overall field of view. So what that's gonna translate into is, let's say you were shooting with a 20mm lens. Well, this is an APS-C camera, so there's already gonna be a 1.5 times crop factor added to 20mm, so it's gonna act like a 30mm. But additionally, when you shoot in 4K at 60 FPS, there's gonna be an additional 1.5 times crop. So that 20mm is gonna act like a 40 or a 45mm, which is a pretty massive change in field of view. So you'll just wanna compensate by using wider lenses when you shoot in 4K at 60 FPS. Now, in terms of autofocus performance with this camera, Nikon has come a long way. I remember my first camera, my first real DSLR was the Nikon D7000. Let me tell you, the video autofocus on that camera was not the best. This is a huge upgrade. So as we can see here, I'm actually recording the Viewfinder. There's incredible eye autofocus tracking. So if I just touch the screen on Abby, I mean, it's already doing it. I mean, it locks on laser sharp, and it doesn't just have to track a person as well. So if I want to follow maybe her hand right here that's drawing, this is Damian Lillard. This is outstanding. I mean, look at this. This is incredible autofocus. There's also product showcase mode. So in this camera, if I want the camera to prioritize, maybe Abby's gonna hold up something in the foreground, and I want to make sure it's not just actually tracking her eye, I want it to focus on the object in front of her face. You can turn on product showcase mode, and it's gonna be able to prioritize the object in front of her rather than just her eye. Now, in terms of color performance with the Z50 Mark II, you can shoot in 10-bit color with this camera when you shoot in the H.265 codec. So all that really means is it's gonna be a really high quality file with a lot of really great color information. You can also shoot in 8-bit color at the H.265 and H.264 codecs, which are just gonna be a little bit less color information. So I almost always prefer to shoot in 10-bit color when I can, because it's gonna give you way better color results, especially if you're somebody who likes to color grade your footage. So for most of the footage we're shooting today, we're shooting in the SDR color profile. So this is gonna be just the standard dynamic range, and colors are gonna look really normal straight out of camera. So this is just kind of how your eye these things, the colors are going to look correct when you hit record. I did change the picture control to neutral because I like the way that this kind of softens up the contrast just a little bit. And then if I want to re-add some contrast or some saturation after the fact, I can do that in post-production. And then for those of you who really want to color grade your footage, this camera can shoot in N-Log, which is Nikon's version of the log format. And that's going to be that really flat profile to retain the most dynamic range and most color information in your scene. So if you check out these bright windows behind us, the exposure outside is going to be, 2 or 3 or 4 stops brighter than it is in the interior of the building. So when you shoot in the log color profile, it's going to help retain a lot of that information in more dynamically rich scenes so you can preserve the detail that's outside as well as still have good exposure inside. And because Nikon also purchased the camera company Red recently in the last year or so, you can actually use Red's LUTs to color correct all of your N-Log footage, which is a really cool feature. We'll link some of those LUTs down in the description below. Now, the Z50 Mark II also features a 3.5mm mic input as well as a headphone jack to monitor audio. And it's kind of weird that actually the original Z50 did not have a headphone jack, and neither does their other APS-C camera, the Nikon Z30. But now the Z50 Mark II does add that headphone jack, so it's much easier to ensure that you're actually capturing high quality audio. This camera also features Nikon's electronic VR, which stands for vibration reduction, which is just kind of their version of software stabilization. And it works really solid for getting some of these micro jitters that happen when you're hand holding a camera. So it eliminates some of those micro jitters. Also, a lot of these lenses that we're filming with today have lens vibration reduction on them. So that's an additional layer of VR that you can add to your image just to reduce camera shake even more. We literally did not bring a gimbal out to the shoot. We're just using a tripod for some of these talking head shots, as well as shooting handheld for basically everything else. So the Nikon Z50 Mark II's design is honestly really solid. It feels like a little bit more of a beefier camera. It doesn't feel like it's such a small APS-C style. It's got a really good grip. It's got a really good feel. There's a ton of buttons that are customizable on the camera as well. So you can change your button layout if you want, change a few things around. Overall, this camera definitely feels like more of a professional design and feel rather than a more compact beginner APS-C style. Now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the photo aspects of this camera.
Hey guys, I'm Macy. I'm Craig's wife. I'm here in the studio with Abby. This is actually the studio that Craig proposed to me in, so full circle moment. I'm shooting with the Nikon Z50 Mark II today, which is kind of fun because my first ever camera was the Nikon D90 back in junior high. So this is a huge upgrade from that. Now let's look at some of the photo features. So today we're shooting in RAW with Abby. That just helps retain the most information for editing after the fact. However, this camera can also shoot in RAW plus JPEG, which means it also captures JPEG photos, which make editing quicker and easier. They're great for popping on social media. So if you want to be able to shoot both RAW and JPEG together, this camera is able to do that, which is what we're doing today. So the autofocus performance has been really smooth today. It's very snappy in being able to find her eye. It's also nice to be able just to touch the screen and pick up any focus point that I click. That's been super helpful. So if I want to come back around over here and focus on her actual drawing right there, or if I decide I want to focus on her pen, I can click right there and it picks up her pen or her iPad. You get the idea. So it's very easy for picking up any focus point. Specifically though, if you just throw her in the frame, it picks up her eye, no problem. And that's made shooting today a lot easier. So this camera can shoot in 11 frames per second RAW using the mechanical shutter, which is what we're doing today. If you absolutely needed a higher frame rate, it has the ability to shoot 30 frames per second, but it's in the JPEG format and it's using an electronic shutter, which if you do that, you will definitely get some rolling shutter and some warping. So I don't necessarily recommend using the 30 frames per second, but it does exist. And right now for what we're doing in the studio, the 11 frames per second with the mechanical shutter is just fine. So one thing that I want to highlight is the viewfinder here. It's nice and bright. It's worked well as I've been shooting my shots with Abby today. They did upgrade the brightness to 1000 nit brightness, which is double the amount that the Mark I had, so quite the upgrade. And if you see it here, it sits pretty flush to the camera. They actually made it more compact and smaller, but it's plenty big to use and has worked really well today. So I've been impressed. So one thing that's kind of unique and fun about the Mark II of the Z50 is that it has a pop-up flash. And this is kind of unique in mirrorless cameras currently. The industry is kind of stepping away from that, but this one has it. So it's helpful if you're in a situation where you just want more fill light, or if you're using off-camera flashes and you need an extra little bit of light, this one has it. So yeah, flash. So another fun aspect of the Z50 Mark II is that it has something called picture controls, or you might think of them as picture profiles. Basically, if you push this button right here, you'll see this little menu of different, basically color profiles that you can choose from. These looks just get baked straight into your image so that they save you some editing down the line, which is kind of helpful. You might be familiar with Fujifilm, and they have their film simulations on their cameras. So this is kind of Nikon's take at that. So if you see here, just cycling through, if I wanted this monochrome look right here, I could click that and then boom, I have a black and white photo of Abby baked right in. So after spending a portrait session here with Abby shooting on the Nikon Z50 Mark II, I would definitely be able to use this camera in professional settings. I mean, I did today and it held up great. So yeah, I would recommend this fun little camera.
A couple improvements that I think I would like to see out of this camera would be, first, there's only one SD card slot, and I'm somebody who loves to have 2 card slots. It's just nice for that redundancy, or if I'm shooting a lot of content, if I want the content to overflow to the next card slot, that would be really helpful. So that's something that Nikon could improve in a future flagship APS-C camera. Also, when you shoot in 4K at 60 frames per second, that 1.5 times crop does feel pretty tight at times. So it's something you need to accommodate for by shooting with wider camera lenses. So overall thoughts with the Nikon Z50 are, this really is the best hybrid APS-C camera that Nikon currently offers. And it also competes really well against something like the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, because both of these cameras can shoot 10-bit video, but the Nikon Z50 has that electronic viewfinder, which photographers are going to love. The Nikon is also cheaper at $909, which is kind of a weird price, but it's $909 brand new. And then something like the ZV-E10 II is $1,000, or the A6700 is like $1,400. So I think the Nikon is positioned at a really fair price point. Adding that ability to use those picture controls is a great way to win over beginners who don't want to edit every single raw file for photography, but want a quick way to edit your photos and get different creative looks really quickly. And they just trickle down some of their higher end features from their professional cameras into the Z50 Mark II, while adding a couple key features that other content creators are really going to love. If you want to check out the Nikon Z50 Mark II, we'll link it down in the description below. And if you want to watch another video from us here at Think Media, you can click or tap the screen right here, and we'll see you in the next video.